This indictment was a racketeering indictment, and we'll explain all about what racketeering is. But the indictment, if you have read it, there's about 98 pages in it. The first thing that I think that you will find that is extremely strange is that the main count, the racketeering count, is missing from the indictment. Now, you really cannot make this stuff up. But I want to show you that here is page 71, which ends all of the acts. These are the facts that, the counts are based on. The counts are the charges that she's being made. And again, she's making these charges against 19 individuals who happen to be her political adversaries. So if we go to page 71, those are the acts. And we go over to page 72, which starts the counts, and you see that it starts with count 2. Count 1 is the racketeering indictment. And as you can see here, right there, but it's not even in the actual indictment. Well, why did that happen? Well, first of all, Fawni rushed this out Monday night, you may remember, at 11 o'clock on the 14th. And obviously she had not done all of her work. So what was the need to rush this out in a manner that would be that incredibly sloppy? First of all, she leaked this indictment on the internet Monday afternoon, then retracted it off the internet, and then rushed to have a press conference at 11 o'clock on Monday night. One of the issues was that when the indictment was on the internet, someone noticed that it had a case number and a judge already assigned, even though there had been no vote from the grand jury at that time. So lots of unanswered questions as to why the judge and the case number was assigned, apparently even before the grand jury had even voted for what we call a true bill. All of that aside, it doesn't really matter. We're going to go into a little bit more detail. So Fawni says that, and she said this in her 11 o'clock press conference, rather than to abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants, which are all 19 defendants, engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn the results of Georgia's presidential, overturn the results of Georgia's presidential election. That was on August 14th. So I want to focus in on rather than to abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges. Well, the truth is that former President Donald Trump did, who's one of the indictees here, he did abide by the actual Georgia's legal process. He submitted a case, or his attorney submitted a case on December 4th, 2020, and the challenge was required to be heard in 20 days. However, Fulton did not assign a judge to this until the 31st of December. And the hearing was not scheduled until January 8th, after Congress had certified the results of the election. So basically, that delay rendered the lawsuit moot, and no evidence was heard, and the president had to withdraw the lawsuit because it was never assigned a judge and submitted at the appropriate time. So the issue that rather than to abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, that's a completely false statement that she made to the press, which was picked up nationally. They did abide by, at least the president did, and then she goes on to claim that there was a criminal racketeering enterprise. So let's look at what racketeering means. We're looking at OCGA 1643 in the state of Georgia. Racketeering activity, and I don't expect you to be able to read this, but it's a person, it has to require a crime, any crime, and they talk about some of the crimes that racketeering charges would apply. They talk about homicide, assault and battery, kidnapping, prostitution, burglary, arson, bombs, theft, robbery, prostitution, alcohol distribution, unlawful. All these kinds of, these are what serious crimes that are charged to racketeering. So Fawni had to go more deeper into it than this, and she goes down to the next 15 or so, and she finds a few things that she would like to apply here. One, soliciting, forgery, false statements and writings, impersonating a public officer, and influencing witnesses. These are the things that she based the racketeering indictment on. So these are the counts. I've got the actual counts. I've had to group them because there's so many. I'm going to group them into these. I'm just going to talk about 5 of these groups, but that's the count number in blue associated with all of the counts that she has actually filed. So I'm going to go through just some of the basic ones. Making false statements and writings. We found out when we looked at the indictment that some of the statements she alleged were false were actually true, because she's still denying that any fraud occurred in the 2020 election. Most of the statements could likely be proven true if the evidence was ever allowed to be presented in court, but a lot of the evidence we have not seen yet. Defendants certainly didn't knowingly, willfully, and unlawfully make false statements, which that's the requirement to be racketeering. And even if there were false statements are protected by free speech in the United States of America, the First Amendment, that you can make a mistake and say something that's not true, and you're still protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, unless it was horribly malicious. So I'm going to give you a few examples of the true statements that are alleged or false. Most of you folks here in the room will probably already familiar with these. She says there's a false statement that at least 96,600 mail-in ballots were counted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia, despite there being no record of those ballots having been returned to a county elections office. If you have seen the video of Brad Ravensburger on November 4th, an NBC interview, he says that he had gotten the actual 4.7 million votes had actually been certified, or excuse me, not certified, had been recorded. There was 2% left to count, 94% votes, and Trump had an insurmountable margin of 103,750 with only 94,000 left to count. He knew that because the counties are required to report those numbers. However, he ended up certifying 4.998 million, as y'all know, if you look at the results. That's a difference of 240,000 phantom ballots that were certified, and we don't know where they came from. So the answer, this is 96,000, at least 96,000, 200,000 is more than 96,000. So that is a true statement. Another statement she claimed was false is that a Dominion voting system machine used in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Antrim County, Michigan, mistakenly recorded 6,000 votes for Joe Biden when the votes were actually cast for Donald Trump. That's a true statement. In Antrim County, the system did record 6,000 votes for Joe Biden when the votes were actually cast for Donald Trump. Now, we don't know why. There's still some debate as to why that happened. Was it what we call a ballot alignment error, which is more or less a human error, or was it malware? Those are things to be discussed. However, the statement that she alleges is false is actually true. Another one, she says that 200,000 more votes were recorded than the number of people who voted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Pennsylvania. Well, this is not in Georgia. However, I happen to have a few friends that work for Audit the Vote in Pennsylvania, and they said it was actually 700,000. That election was certified with 700,000 more votes than the number of people who voted, and even today, over 100,000 have never been reconciled. That margin of victory was 80,000 votes in Pennsylvania.